Um, it looks like we're going to have a nice crowd again. We're up over 35, which is very good. Uh, we want to start with some announcements. So, Walt, if you would like to get your announcements ready.
Yes, yeah, I got a few here, so bear with me, everybody. First of all, if I'd like to say it's kind of actually different tonight. This is November the 10th. And believe it or not, we usually always meet on Veterans Day somehow. But tomorrow's Veterans Day, and I want to say thank you to all of our members that have served in the armed services over their years, and I want to say thank you. Normally, if we were at the meeting, I'd say stand up, and you're welcome to stand up where you seated tonight. But or if you just want to wave and say, let us know you. I know there's a lot of you here that are veterans, and want to just make sure we say thank you to everybody and appreciate it. So if everybody wants to give a big round of applause, I appreciate it. So. All right. Also, I wanted to bring forth a little bit more announcement too that we have not been able to secure a facility, and I was waiting on Doug Alexander to get a little bit of a survey out to get a feel who would show up in meetings if we did them in person. But right now, we have chosen to go ahead and move forward with holding the meeting virtual at least in January and February. Those are being the dead of the winter months anyway, so there's always a high risk that we could have winter weather and not be able to meet anyway. So we're going to continue to go ahead and do the next the January February meeting as a virtual meeting to start off the new year. But wanted to let y'all know that. The next thing I want to announce is I want to go ahead and announce our latest addition to the board. We had our elections and we have the final results. I want to say thank you to Chuck Hesh and to Rick Coble, the electronic elections, and taking care of everything that needed to be done. But our new board is as follows. Perry Lamb was elected as the new superintendent. Congratulations to Perry. Jim Dacca is going to be your new director of administration. That'll actually what Perry's been doing. Gary Fish, who's been your refreshment guy, is now the director of personnel. Gary's on here. There he is. Congratulations, guys. And then we have our directors at large. Jim Hobbs cannot attend tonight. He had a family emergency, but Jim Hobbs has been reelected as a director at large. We've also added Hank Primus. Hank, congratulations, sir. Thank you. Welcome. And then there also is Peter Thomas. He was on here earlier. I think he's here. He's somewhere, I think.
Yeah, he's on.
Okay. Congratulations to Peter Thomas. And he's also a new board member. This will be his first time. And then Raymond Stewart is also, he was done as a write-in candidate. And we're going to welcome Raymond Stewart to our board as well. So I just wanted to let y'all know that these are your new board members that will be coming on board in 2021. So speaking of that as well, there are two members that we have in our organization right now, and there may be more, but right now I know of two that are actually serving active duty right now. Raymond Stewart and Tim Travis are members, and both are currently serving active duty in the military. So both are guardsmen, but they are actually called up for active duty at this point. So that's why we don't see them at some of our meetings and things like that, but they are out there serving our country right now. So just wanted to let y'all know that. The next item that I want to bring up is next month. Normally we have a holiday party and we gather and we have a big dinner and we have a lot of fun as we get together. We're not going to be meeting next month as in person, but we are going to go ahead and have a holiday party. We're going to do it online, so it's going to be kind of different, but we're going to try to keep some traditions and we're going to figure out some new ones as well. So with tradition there, we are going to continue to have our award presentation that night. And then we're also going to go ahead and still have our trivia. And so what I'd like to tell you is if you would plan on Tuesday night, December the 8th, 6 o'clock p.m., bring your dinner, bring your beverages, whatever you like, bring your spouse because we're doing the trivia and they're welcome to play as well. And we want them to play and participate. And we will have some nice prizes for everybody. We will have some railroad related prizes for the membership. And then for our guests that night, we'll again always have some nice prizes for our guests that we can share. And I will get those mailed out to the winners after that evening. We'll get them mailed out to them. So we will continue our tradition in that capacity. One of the things I want to do also at the holiday gathering is I want to try to open up the mic for a lot of you so you can talk to each other, see each other. If you have a camera, I would highly encourage you to have it hooked up so we can see you. I know a lot of people haven't seen each other in a while, so I know they would like to be able to see each other. So one of those things I think we all like to be able to do. And that is open for guests as well next month. That's not just for the members, that is also for our guests as well. So we always do Toys for Tots. And so because we're not meeting at a meeting, we can't just gather and collect all the toys. So what we are going to do on Saturday, December the 12th, right now we have 3 locations. One of our members will be in those locations. Rick Coble has volunteered. He will be at Legacy Station. I will probably be over at Hobbytown, USA in Kennesaw. And then somebody will also be at Blue Ox Trains. On Saturday, December the 12th, between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m., you will be able to drop off a new unwrapped toy, and we will have somebody there to collect it. And we will get them all pulled together and get them back to the drop-off points for the Toys for Tots campaign. But this is something we've done, and we want to continue to do it. It's always been something our members have been very generous, so we would hope that you'll be able to do that. We'll get it out in the publication, and we'll send out more information with all the details and addresses and things like that. Hopefully, if you're going to drop off the toy, you might want to run in and get your favorite train stuff at one of the stores as well, if you're in those areas. If there's another location and somebody's interested in volunteering to cover a location, please let me know, and I'll be glad to talk to you and see if we can add another location for a drop-off point. So this is a huge community, and we can only do so much sometimes, but we're going to try our very best to try to do something this year. So, but mark your calendar for that. Also, December 5th will be the board of directors this year. We're going to have a December 5th planning meeting for the upcoming year. So if you're interested in being involved in the division as a committee or a committee chairperson or like to get involved, please contact Perry. He will be your new superintendent, and but you might want to attend this meeting, and it'll be online as well, Saturday, December 5th, between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. But contact me so I can get you on the invite list for that day to make sure that we got you in, because it'll be a private session coming in. So I think those are all my announcements, Sally.
I think so.
I think I had a bunch, but I got them all covered.
You got it. Okay.
Right.
Hey, did you want to talk about the train show, please?
Yes, I always want to talk about the train show. We're moving forward and proceeding as if everything will be fine for a train show on March 13th and 14th. We've one done thing. We have changed the name to the Piedmont Division Model Train Show so that everybody will know who is actually having it. Just the Model Train Show, that could be anybody. Now we know it's the Piedmont Division. We are out there. We have things going out to vendors. We're trying to sell the tables now, and things are progressing very well. We will be asking for volunteers come February and January. So keep thinking about it, because we're going to need all sorts of volunteers to everything from getting stuff unloaded to selling tickets and everything. So we just want you to mark your calendars, and the way it looks right now, we will be the first train show in the year 2021 if we're able to pull it off.
Yep.
We're trying very hard to make it happen.
Hank's doing a fine job. I appreciate all the hard work, Hank, and your team. And I'm looking forward to it as well, and I think all the members are going to be looking forward to a train show. So should be a good year. Hope to get 2021 off on the right foot.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay, Jim Dacka, do you want to talk to us about the photo contest results?
Sure. Let me get our And you are sharing.
Yep. Everyone can see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. We had 43 submissions, which was a phenomenal number of images being sent in. This came from 11 of our members. I also want to thank James Bando, Charlie Mason, and Paul Volker for their assistance in judging. We had two categories. The first category were prototype photos. We had a tremendous response with high quality, beautiful photographs that really made it difficult to judge. Between the four judges, out of 31 photos in the prototype category, we had 13 that made the first cut. So it was very, very difficult. And in recognition of that, we've actually started a category for honorable mentions. We've got 4 honorable mentions, and then we've got a tie for third place. The first one for an honorable mention is John Stevens. Southern 6133 gets a bath. This is a great shot, great angle. The lighting is beautiful. It's a nice shiny engine, just a very, very nice photo. Next, honorable mention, Harvey George, CSX 5530 in a thunderstorm. And this is one of those situations where you are just in the right place at the right time. He captures this bolt of lightning coming down behind the engine. With the overcast skies, the colors are muted, but it really came out very, very nice. Next honorable mention is Rob Keeney for Shea Fireman Resting. It's a great shot with the fireman looking right at the camera. The angle gives a great deal of detail of the Shea engine, as well as I think the trees in the background balances out all the detail on the engine. Very, very nice photo. John Stevens gets another honorable mention. Pan Am Railway's Heritage Unit. This is a great shot, especially with that majestic background, the beautiful mountains. It's personally, I like the colors on the station signs, the switch stand, and even the street signs. It really complements the engine. I think it ties things together very, very nice. Third place, first person that got a tie is Walter Goodwin for Autumn Thunder, which is a perfect name for this picture. It is a beautiful thing. You can actually feel the thunder coming, or the roar of the engine coming through the autumn's foliage. It's a great angle, excellent lighting. The other third place is Brian Sandberg. This is a great, great shot. It's a spectacular shot. The angle is great. You've got a great view and scale of the engine. You've got the black and dusky cars and the smoke against the subdued back color of the hills and the foreground foliage. And then it's wedged between the beautiful blue sky and the reflection in the pool. Second place, John Stevens, Conway Scenic Railroad, the Mountaineer. This is scenic. The colors are incredible. Wow. You've got all of the colors on the engine matched somewhere in the foliage. You've got a great angle with a trestle bridge, just a wonderful, wonderful shot. First place goes to Brian Sandberg. You don't have to have color to have a great image. This is a photo that you could look at and say this could have been done any time in the last 100 years. It's great detail. The lighting is great. Going to black without color is was a very good idea. It has a timeless quality to it, and it has a slow shutter speed, which is why the smoke and the steam is kind of misting off to the side. It gives a little bit of motion for a still photograph. Very, very nice photo. Model photo contest winners. Here again, we had a tie for third place. First, Sally Bando, Smitty's Bake Shop. I think most of you would recognize this scene from Steve Austin's layout. It's a great angle. She's got all of the color, all of the action. It's just a beautiful shot. Everything is very compact, beautiful angle, very well done. The other third place, Raymond Stewart, Central of Georgia. Very nice photo. The trees and the foreground vegetation kind of frame the shot. It's just a very well done, very well executed. Second place, Paul Schenk, Waltham Screw Company. Beautiful shot, lots of color. You can look off and you can see into the distance. It really has a great sense of scale and scope. You can see the hills in the background. Just very, very well done. You've got a lot of detail going on. You've got the active workers up there with all of their supplies for the roofing. Just very, very, a scene that you can get lost in. And then finally, first place, Thomas Klomoski. When you have a photo that it takes you a couple minutes to realize that's not a prototype, that's a model, that says a lot about the craftsmanship that went into building this layout. It's just a gorgeous, gorgeous shot. The weathering, the detailing is just exquisite. It's really difficult for someone to look at this and not see it as a prototype. That is our photo contest. I want to thank everyone for participating. All 43 images from all 11 people will be in the timetable. As an editor of the timetable, having lots of pictures and just a few names and things makes my job a lot easier. Thanks to everyone who participated. And we'll be getting the certificates out to everyone at some point.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Reading pictures is always easy.
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to announce that Peter Youngblood is going to have a garage sale the 14th and 15th at his home in Kennesaw. If you want, let's see, just so you know, it's this weekend. Anyway, if you need models judged for AP certificates, you need to talk to Charlie Mason. I have one other thing, and then we'll get to Dave Berman. Walton Perry recently did a virtual live make and take clinic worldwide. It's the first time it's ever been done. So they made history the last few weeks. I just wanted to congratulate them for from all of us on the Piedmont division. I also wanted to ask Mike, is there anything, Mike Deaton, that you want to add to our pilgrimage that's going on right now?
I certainly want to thank everyone, all the layout hosts who participated and had their videos up. We are halfway through our weekends. We have 2 more weekends coming up with a whole bunch of more videos. This Saturday at 11 o'clock, we are doing another live post Q&A session online. You go to the Piedmont Pilgrimage website for the link to that and further information. And again, we had a very good one with Tom Klomoski this past Saturday. The one coming up this Saturday will be Jerry Mitchell-Rich. Is going to be answering questions and taking you around his layout live on the YouTube live presentation. So we hope you'll check in for that. And of course, the videos on Saturday and the videos on Sunday.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mike. Okay, we are ready for our guest speaker. This is Dave Berman, and he is an avid operator and modern era modeler in HO. And he lives in my favorite state, Wisconsin. That's where I'm from. Anyway, he does a variety of different topics, including agricultural, chemical industry, and industrial archaeology, among others, as part of his modeling. He's been a NMRA member since birth. How many of us can say that? Let's see. He became active again in 1995 when he helped with the regional convention in St. Louis. I don't know what else I need to tell them. You've done some NMRA volunteer work as well. He is an instructional tech support specialist for the Midwestern University. His subject tonight is The River Meets the Rails. Are you ready, Dave?
I am as ready as I will ever be.
Perfect. You have the floor.
Well, the interesting part of all this, number one, it's good to see everybody. I can honestly say a lot of you I know by meeting you at conventions. Some of you I know by working with you on the National Train Show staff, and others I know from seeing your names online and responding to things and just having all kinds of good time. The world keeps getting smaller every day. And the NMRA keeps getting bigger every day, although it may not be exactly the way we think it is, because we're doing a lot of it virtually now. As Sally said, I work as an instructional tech support specialist for Winona State University up here. And I actually work in Minnesota. I live in Wisconsin, and I'm from Iowa. I'm the Midwest Mongol perfectly. So I like to say I get around, I guess. But I've done a little bit of everything. I was a college instructor. I taught professional photography for 20 some years before I decided, and they decided that I knew all this instructional tech stuff. I should be teaching teachers, and that's kind of where I ended up. Let's go ahead and get the video or get the presentation going. Oops, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Put our screen up here. And we'll go ahead and pop the image up. I hope.
Yep, you got it.
Well, there we go. Now I can see it. Okay, so we're going to call this A River Runs Through It. Yeah, there was a movie by that name, but I steal everything I possibly can. And this is about the rail and barge connection, although because today is a significant anniversary, we're going to throw in a little bit of the Great Lakes too. So basically what we're going to talk about today is those big rivers that run right down the center of our country. They also run through and along a lot of the coastal waterways. They're ways that railroads meet other modes of transportation, and that's kind of what this clinic is about. As they said before, I'm kind of a agricultural geek. I'm really into grain elevators, covered hoppers, those kinds of things. So it was a natural extension because I'm also a bit of a boat nerd, and a lot of the guys in our group are boat nerds because we're interested in the car ferries that went across the Great Lakes. We kind of get interested in that. I've got a bunch of ore modelers that are into ore boats. I got into grains because of grain boats and barges. So too many computers. Well, it starts with a seed, and sometimes that seed is planted in an old mode, an old technology. I tell people if you're modeling earlier than what I'm modeling, there are pictures out there. You just have to dig a little bit harder. And one of the best places I know of to dig is in how the Amish farm. Yeah, they probably don't do it with a John Deere planter, or not many of them, but they're adopting some of the new tricks. Most of the time they're doing it with an older seed drill, but they're still doing it by horse. I have not seen a tractor on an Amish farm up in the upper Midwest yet. I'm told maybe, but I haven't seen it. So it starts with a seed. We got to plant something. A lot of the commodities that come to the rails and come to the rivers here are agricultural commodities. And we'll talk a little bit that down the road. But eventually it gets harvested. And it's harvest season in full tilt going up here. We're harvesting a lot of corn, a lot of soybeans. Out to the west and to the north, they're harvesting wheat, milo, millet, all kinds of things that go in your bird feeders getting harvested. Pretty much anything that gets grown has to move in some way, shape, or form to a market that is going to use it. And chances are pretty good that's going to be by rail. But when we get bigger, and it grows a little bit, we got to find bigger ways to move it. Now, a trailer to a grain elevator is one thing, but we've got to load it either onto a box car. In the era of backing far into the transition, they were loading boxcars. Today, in my world, it's covered hoppers, and it's big covered hoppers. They were picking up these boxcars onesie, twosies at a time at these smaller elevators. Today, it's 110-car unit trains, but it's still the same kind of game. We still got to move it. And we move it by rail, be that a unit train of solid covered hoppers or the local Rock Island Local in Indianola, Iowa, picking up one or two covered hoppers, a bunch of boxcars. In the days this Rock Island picture was taken, the rail was so bad that 100-ton covered hoppers were a dicey thing, so they were using anything they could to get grain out of elevators on this particular line. Well, I say it starts with a seed, and I said I've been active in the NMRA currently since about 1995, and it started with a regional convention in St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis holds a lot of good things in my heart for model railroading. It was the first big NMRA event I ever attended. And one of the tours on that regional convention was a place called at that time was called the Great Riverport. It has changed, and we'll show you what it's changed into, but they had a tour of this place, and it was the one place I'd ever been that combined a lot of my loves, covered hoppers, loading grain into barges. They had cranes, they had all kinds of interesting stuff. So I really enjoyed this tour. And I was really, really excited and hoping that when we were going to go back in 2010, that I was going to get to go back there. Well, guess what? COVID took us all out. So that was my first seed. It's America's central port today, and we'll actually talk about it a little bit more. It's grown considerably since I toured it the first time, and there's all kinds of different things. But it is one of the largest locations of transfer of rail and trucks to barges in the country. It's in Granite City, Illinois. Well, a number of years ago, when I moved up here to start working at Winona State, I moved to a little tiny town called Trempealeau, Wisconsin. And I have a really, 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 really great spot in Trempealeau, Wisconsin. I live about a block away from the BNSF main line. If you look out my sliding glass doors and you use the spotting scope, I can look across the river and see the CP, which was the Soo Line, Milwaukee Road before that. I also live right above Lock and Dam number 6, which means I get to see all of the barges go in and out every day. So it's a great place to be. I say it's as good as anything. My friends in my operating group, River Rail, affectionately refer to my house as Trempealeau Tower because they say I control the movements. I have nothing to do with the movements, but I see an awful lot of it, and I call a lot of them out. As they said, I'm an avid operator. You can find me dispatching on any one of the 13 River Rail layouts that we run here at any given moment. I can be known to run a yard. I run trains. I've done all kinds of strange stuff in these things. I'm also known to be one of the guys who trains new operators because I'm patient. They say because you're a teacher, you're patient to a fault. My connection to Perry and Horn. The picture that you see is me doing a live interview on the floor of the convention in Portland, Oregon. I'm not afraid to get in front of a microphone and talk about model railroading or get in front of a computer and talk about model railroading. But that's not why we came here. I'm going to show you a video, and I can never guarantee how the sound is going to go on these, but there's no talking in this one anyway. This is a company called Consolidated Grain and Barge, and it'll give you an idea, a little bit of a feel of how all this works. So why rivers? Why do we think about rivers? Well, as I said, the core of the country has one of the largest set of navigable inland waterways in the world. The Mississippi River is navigable from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to Minneapolis-St. Paul. The Missouri runs off of that particular Mississippi River all the way up as far as Sioux City and is navigable. The Illinois and Ohio rivers are navigable. The Illinois up almost to Chicago, the Ohio well into Ohio and somewhat into Pennsylvania. the Arkansas River across Arkansas into Oklahoma, the Intercoastal Waterway off of New Orleans all the way down into Texas. So we get a lot of connections and ways to get product somewhere else. So rivers are really important, at least to the commodities that we often haul on railroads. When you lay the current railroad community over it, you see that it's a big network and it all moves towards those places. They show Omaha, Chicago, St. Paul, St. Louis, one of the places that we talk extensively about, Memphis, Nashville, Mobile, New Orleans, all the way across, Houston, huge in-water port. All of these places move commodities and help commodities go worldwide. It used to be grain was usually consumed within 20 miles of the farmstead. Not anymore. That grain may go worldwide. It goes a long way on rail car. It gets transferred sometimes to a barge, which gets transferred to a bigger ship, and it moves. It goes a lot of different places. And it's been around for as long as anybody can remember. Before there were barges, there were steamboats and steamships. This is actually down at the port of New Orleans. I love this Illinois Central boxcar. I love that quad diamond logo. It's almost enough to make me switch eras. Notice I say almost. But delivered by mule team, loads of cotton going on a boat, going somewhere to be processed. That's why the rivers are important. That's why the railroads are important. We can't get up every river in Iowa. You couldn't possibly do that. A lot of them are great for kayaks. You couldn't get a barge into one of them if you tried. But we have a love and hate relationship with the railroad. This is my work town, Winona, Minnesota. This is during a minor flood. This is basically a port that I'm going to show you later, and this is where the barge terminal would be. So we still have to have railroad. And if you kind of look in the background, you can see a little bit of the railroad tracks back there. This is the ADM facility and the Cenex Harvest States facility, and it's also a secondary facility for loading sand and all kinds of different aggregate product. And like I say, the railroads have a love-hate relationship. A couple of years back, the Missouri River and the Platte River went berserk. There was a lot of rain in the Nebraska Platte River Valley, and it washed out a lot of railroad. And they were doing everything they could to keep the railroads in place and to keep working on them. But again, sometimes you need to have the barges. What they did was they'd reroute grain shipments to different places. They could say, okay, we aren't going to be able to load out of Omaha this year or this particular period. Let's take it up to Sioux City. Or we can't load on the Missouri. Let's take it across Iowa over to the Mississippi. It gives them a variety of ways to get product from the producer to the consumer. So why river? Well, if you look at one rail car, it's 110 tons. About 4,000 bushels of grain go in one of those. One barge basically takes that up 17 times to 58,333 bushels. Now, a typical unit train is going to take about 11,000 tons of grain, about 432,000 bushels. Well, let's turn that to a barge tow, and we can basically double, almost triple it. So you see, a lot of those 108-car trains are going over to the river to be dumped into barges because instead of hauling 3 trains, we're hauling 1 for virtually the same amount of energy use. We're being more efficient. We're trying to find a way to make it a little bit better, a little bit faster. So what can we haul? Well, we've talked a lot about grain. Pretty much any powdered aggregate product, any kind of grain. Fertilizer goes up and down the rivers all the time. But a lot of the product that we're seeing hauled, at least on my end of the world, is grain. Grain coming out of the Twin Cities, grain coming out of McGregor, Iowa, Davenport, St. Louis, going down to the Gulf ports where it's loaded onto larger ships because it's being exported. There's a huge corn market. There's an even bigger soybean market. So that's one of the things we know we can haul. And that's why I'm excited about it, because I'm a grain guy. Love those covered hoppers. But you probably don't think about coal. This is East Dubuque, Illinois. East Dubuque is a very, very, very tiny town across the river from Dubuque, Iowa. But it's noted for a couple of things. Number one, bars, because it has more bars than anything else in the town. It also has the BNSF main line, or the old CB&Q main line, and the old IC main line, and the old Chicago Great Western. Well, it also happens to have a coal terminal where they dump coal into barges. Now, you may think in the modern era, all of that coal is coming by unit trains they can basically rotary couple twist. Guess what? No. Power plants along the river often don't have room for an unloading loop or even sidings for an unloading loop. So they can bottom dump the cars. In this case, this happens to be a place that dumped for a company that's happy to me, Dairyland Power, because they produce my electricity. And basically they haul a coal train in here and they dump the cars. They transload it all onto barges, and the barges go up the river to Genoa, Wisconsin, or to Cassville, Wisconsin, or to, trying to think of the next town up, but I'll forget it. The reason I put this in is David Lelbach, Tangent Scale Models, just introduced some really, really beautiful BN coal cars. This was the service. This coal train ran across northern Iowa. We're not used to seeing coal trains, but it went this way because they dumped to barges on the Mississippi River, and it looks something like this. So a lot of coal moves up and down those rivers, particularly metallurgical coal into the bottom of the Ohio Valley, because they'll also dump coke in these barges. One of the largest producers of coke in the country is in a little town in Coates, Minnesota, and all of that gets transferred into barges, or it gets transferred onto rail cars that eventually go to barges and get shipped down the river, down the Mississippi, and then back up the Ohio. So coal is a big product up here. Now, coal power plants are going away, so we're not seeing as much coal being hauled. What else can we haul? Well, if the other thing, if you know anything about Wisconsin, is we have a lot of sand, particularly in the region I live in. It's called the Coulee region because there's an awful lot of bluffs. Those bluffs are essentially limestone, which is basically sand held together by lime. It's one of the best materials known for the process of fracking, or getting oil out of the ground. Well, guess what? Barges don't work if you're going to South Dakota or North Dakota to frack, but they do work if you're going to Texas. So they've put in frac sand terminals, lots of different things that we can use. And this is a frac sand plant not very, very far from my house. They're producing about 50 carloads of sand a day. It's a little bit slower now because they're not fracking as much, but that business has started to come back because of interest in having lower energy costs. So frac sand moves. Well, one of the other things that you don't think about is one of the places that does the frac sand also produces sand for glass, and some of the finest sand available for automotive glass. It is in a little tiny town called Maiden Rock in Wisconsin. That's along the Mississippi River too, and they transfer some of theirs to rail cars, but a lot of it goes into barges as well. So we get some different kinds of mediums. The cars come to the river, they're unloaded, they're conveyed into the barges, and we're on our way. Scrap iron. Now you'd think, why would we haul scrap iron? We can get scrap iron anywhere, right? Well, one of the largest buyers of scrap iron is the Far East. They don't have metal sources. They don't have a million old Chevys and Fords and Plymouths and Toyotas. They don't have the scrap iron resources that we do, but they're still making things out of iron and steel, so they need scrap iron. So a lot of these scrap barges are going down again to the Gulf ports where they're loaded into larger ships. But a lot of the scrap iron moves up and down because there are steel mills along rivers. Rivers provide cooling water for steel mills. So it's a natural thing that if they need end product, scrap gonds go to scrap barges, which go to steel mills. And then there's the entire petrochemical industry. The Intercoastal Waterway, this is one of the largest things that moves on it, but up here it moves as well. everything from liquefied petroleum gas. Those of you who know the upper Midwest knows that it gets really, really cold in December and January and February. A lot of that liquefied petroleum gas is produced down south and brought back up here. They do it on barges. They do it by rail car. This happens to be a refinery close to me where they're pumping asphalt. If you get tar, a lot of the refineries that make tar are in the upper Midwest, and they shove them down the river on barges like these. As a matter of fact, I just saw a 8-barge tow go through the lock about 2 o'clock that was essentially asphalt. Well, one of the things I discovered is it's not just liquid and powdered products. In St. Louis, it's rolls of coil steel. Because guess what? Granite City is a steel mill town. U.S. Steel produces product there. And the product they produce is coil steel, both stainless and regular carbon steel. And a lot of that gets put on rail cars, but even more of it gets put on rail cars and sent over to America's Central Port, where it gets loaded onto barges and taken, again, down the Mississippi and up a river to an auto plant, where it might get stamped into things like fenders and trunk lids and hoods, or products that might be something like a Whirlpool dishwasher. So you think, all these different connections, what else? What else is there? Well, the intermodal guys have figured it out. Now they're actually putting containers on barges. And one of the new places at America's Central Port is an intermodal facility where they're putting containers on barges and shoving them downriver. I'm not quite sure the efficiency in this one yet, but if they can do it, they figured out that there's money to be made doing it. Now, this is one you're probably going to go, what? If you know anything about the upper Midwest, we have wind, and we have lots of it. So we have wind turbines everywhere. Well, one of the things they discovered is that when you're producing wind turbines, they need blades, and they get new blades every 7 years. Well, these are essentially going to be transfer blades. They were shipped over from the Netherlands, a company called Vestas, V-E-S-T-A-S, puts them on a cargo ship. Well, the cargo ship can't get through the locks higher than New Orleans, or much higher than New Orleans. So guess what? Transload them to a barge and haul them to Winona, where they either get offloaded onto a rail car or to a truck. So you see these guys sitting in here. They were pushed up. They were the front toe of a empty set or a loaded set of barges that don't have covers on them yet, but they're eventually going to get shuttled in and they'll get unloaded. So all this traffic that you see gets moved because we need to have a way of getting this commerce to happen. I told you I'm a bit of a boat nerd. That's what we call ourselves. One of my good buddies, Father Tim Odenhoven, is all into car ferries. And he likes putting rail cars on the car ferries. Well, I do a little bit more transfer because I'm a little bit different. But I pay attention to the towboats. Now, a towboat that pushes a lot of barges is going to be a little bit bigger animal. They use diesel engines. They also use turbines. This happens to be a pretty flashy one. This is a newer boat. This is an American River Transportation Company boat. ARTC Co. is owned by ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. It is a big grain producing and production company. They have their own line of barges and their own line of tows. One that isn't quite so elaborate, a little bit older boat from Ingram Barge. It's a little bit more square. It's not quite so aerodynamic. Works just as well. This would be a diesel boat, most likely. But they range in size. You don't have to have big boats everywhere. When we're working harbors and a lot of these smaller barge terminals, which you would find on your railroad, they have some of these smaller tugs. Again, this is another Artco boat. This one is used, it may only push 1 or 2 barges, In Winona, where I work, I see these guys pushing barges to the different terminals. There's a Winona West and a Winona East terminal. All the barges come into the west, and then they'll push them down to the east if they've got one or two that need to go down there. It's just a smaller transfer boat. Okay, I've been talking about boats and loads a lot. What about rail? Well, I talked about frac sand. This is where the frac sand goes. It looks a lot like a grain elevator. It's big old metal tubes that actually were a grain facility at one time. Now they haul frac sand where they basically keep enough of it around to be able to load a barge at a time. They also probably load a truck or two out of here. This is at a company called Aggregates Incorporated up in St. Paul. This is, like I say, my home work town. This is the Winona Westport. As you can see, there's a lot of different places that would load barges. This is all fed by rail, incidentally. There's very little truck traffic into here. Most of it comes in from off of the lines of the CP rail, off of the BNSF, and off of the UP. The elevator you see closest to us with the white small tug in front of it is an ADM facility. The two in the background are CHS, Cenex Harvest States, and GTA, which is now Cenex Harvest States, or Grain Traders Association. There's also a couple of buildings a little bit further down where you see white buildings. Those are powdered commodity buildings. Currently, they're full of salt because it's wintertime and it's getting close to wintertime in the upper Midwest, and we use salt for two things. Number one, because we have lime, we have some of the hardest water known to man. It comes out almost in chunks. So we have to have salt to soften the water up, but we also need it on the roads because when we get ice, it's how we get to work. They put the salt down, we no longer have ice. We also no longer have cars because it dissolves cars wonderfully. A little bit different look at this. Again, this is one of those smaller harbor tugs. You'll notice that not only do you have barges that we're loading, but we have work barges that act as docks that have all kinds of facilities. You'll see a crane on this one. We'll have a little bit better picture of it coming up. Those cranes are used to take covers off. They're used to haul barges. They're used to tip barges up when they're loading or unloading. They have all kinds of different things. Again, there's a lot more to it than just loading and unloading. And I show you this sign. This is Benson Quinn. This is one of the places. Yep, they're dumping. It's harvest. They're dumping beans and corn. Rail is closed. You're going, oh God, they aren't doing rail. Let me show you why they're not doing rail. There are 3 lanes. They're running trucks through the rail dump because right now they've got more grain coming in because it's harvest season than they have coming in with covered hoppers. In about 2 weeks, it'll start coming in covered hoppers, and they'll start transferring fertilizer off of barges out into the territories because they've got to start thinking about next year's crop. So this facility literally shifts back and forth. Sometimes they're loading to barges, sometimes barges are loading to rail cars. So it's kind of a multi-use facility, and depending on the time of year, your operations can reflect whether they're getting a lot of rail cars or whether they're not getting a lot of rail cars. Again, there's another shot of that. We've got a full tow coming in. He's probably going to marshal up as many as 16 barges. Most of the time, we see tows of 12 in 3s because they have to go through the locks. The locks enable us to keep the river level normal so they can keep the 9-foot channel. So there's basically 3 barges side by side. Another shot of Westport, a little bit better shot of CHS, showing you some of the commodities, some of the different conveyors. There's all kinds of interesting stuff in the way they load these. We'll show you some closer pictures in a bit. I popped through that because I wanted to start talking about another facility. It isn't just grain. This is Childs Road in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a little tiny, it's a piece of track. If you've ever been in St. Paul, if you went up there for the convention back in 2001 or 2002, gotta think back that far, or into the 1990s, I don't even remember. At any rate, if you were there, chances are pretty good you may have actually gone to a location near this and toured the CP's St. Paul Yard. Well, this is on the other side of St. Paul Yard. This is serviced by the UP, Equal Opportunity Group. Childs Road would be a perfect shelf layout. Tom Klomoski, I'm thinking of you. Because basically this is a set of tracks, industrial tracks, that's about 3 miles long, and all it is industries all along it that transfer rail commodities to barges and to truck loading facilities. Across the river from there is one of the things we don't often talk about, and that's fertilizer. This happens to be CHS Harvest State's largest fertilizer warehouse at least in Minnesota and probably the upper Midwest. And basically this gets potash, it gets phosphate from Florida, it gets potash from Canada, it gets lime from down in Iowa. It's going to get all kinds of different product at any given moment, and they transfer it off of rail cars here, or off of the barges to rail cars to get it in. And you see across the river, you see Dayton's Bluff. I model the Twin Cities, so Dayton's Bluff is a very important spot on my railroad. It's where all the railroads in the Twin Cities come together on a 4-track main line that looks a lot like Horseshoe Curve. When I talk about salt, Morton Salt. Very simple structure. It's a big honkin' quasit hut where they load and unload salt. Barges bring it up from the Gulf. They pull it out. There's a bagging plant here where they can bag and actually put it on boxcars, or they can load it in covered hoppers. You know it's a salt covered hopper because it's probably rusted to the gills. That scrap is loaded at a company called Alter Metal Group, or any number of places. Alter has facilities all up and down the Mississippi River and up and down the Ohio as well. This is one of the slowest days I've ever seen. They don't seem to have any piles here today. Usually there are piles getting ready to go on barges. They must have had a clean day. They not only load the larger scrap we're used to seeing, but you'll notice that a lot of those areas have elevators and bucket elevators. A lot of that scrap gets ground into very fine powders, and they load it that way as well. It's a little bit easier to handle, and they don't have to use the big scoopy and the metal magnets that they have here. Hawkins Chemical. Hawkins Chemical is noted for things like alkalis and acids. Hopefully they don't mix. They have all kinds of interesting stuff going on. This is one of the best places I go to take tank car pictures, but they transfer stuff out of tank barges onto tank cars and into trucks. A lot of, like I say, a lot of acid and alkali moves through here. There's a lot of acid used in fertilizer manufacturing, strangely enough. And I got to throw a couple of tank car pictures in there because I'm a rail car nut. I take a lot of pictures. As I said, I worked as a professional photographer and taught professional photography, so I take a lot of pictures. And more of that kind. And I'm modeling Hawkins, so I've got a lot of pictures. And we kind of talked about it in another clinic. Okay, Aggregates Incorporated. You saw this picture already. Again, this is where they were loading frac sand. They're not loading as much of that to barges anymore. A lot of it is going by rail car exclusively, but at this time they were moving it down into Texas and Oklahoma any way they could get it there. And it's a typical facility, all kinds of different stuff. They also load gravel up and down the river. One of the problems with the quality of gravel that we get up here in the upper Midwest, it's very lime. If we want something that's a little bit tougher, we have to have it brought in. If we want quartzite or something like that, it has to come from someplace else. Rail cars sometimes deliver it and it gets shipped onto a barge, or barges sometimes deliver it and get shipped someplace else. Westway is one of my favorite places. Westway has tank cars up the wazoo, and they have tank cars for 3 different reasons. You see these big blue tanks and you think, wow, what would they do? What possibly could they do with those? You think, oh God, it's probably oil or gas. No, strangely enough, it's things like molasses, different forms of sugar, different grades of sugar, different grades of things that they can put in there, because one of the things that Westway does a lot of stuff with is they make the components for animal feed. So one whole side of their facility is an animal feed facility. And it's known, and they have something that they call sweet cake. Sweet cake is basically the product they make combining grain and some of that molasses. The cows love it, apparently. The pigs love it. Apparently the chickens do too. But they get a lot of this product, and they have to do it in insulated tank cars, which in the winter they have to heat. So they have a big structure that they have to heat. When you have a structure that you heat, what else could you haul through it? If you have to heat up a tank car, that asphalt we were talking about. A lot of asphalt tank cars come in here from the refineries across the river, and they're transferred into these insulated tanks. They're tanks that are basically wrapped and insulated with stainless steel, and they're kept warm. They have warming structures inside of them so they can be pumped into those tank barges. So Westway gets all kinds of interesting tank cars and load stuff. Occasionally they get grain cars, but not as much. Okay. I said we'd kind of come around. Back in 1995, I visited America's Central Port. I was hoping to do that, and I did it again at the convention in 2001. I was hoping to do it again in 2020. Well, we got canceled. And so when I was doing this for the NMRA-X, I said, well, I'm going to take you to the St. Louis convention. Well, I can't actually get you there. I can take you there virtually. So we're going to talk a little bit about America's Central Port. This one has some narration. This particular video has some narration, so it may or may not be as good as it could be, but we'll see what we can get away with here.
The famous Gateway Arch on the Mississippi River in St. Louis stands guard over one of America's busiest waterways. America's Central Port lies just north of the Gateway to the west, at the heart of America's transportation network. The 1,200 acres are strategically designed to provide complete access to the three major modes of freight transportation: river, rail, and road. Besides complete access to America's second largest inland port and barge waterway, the Mississippi River, America's Central Port also has access to the 6 Class I railroads and 4 interstate highways. America's Central Port has been entrusted with the task of expanding economic development in the region. The landscape of the port is constantly changing and improving to service the most demanding needs of our region and its customers. Dozens of manufacturing companies have also made America's Central Port their home. The convenience of producing product, warehousing, and shipping all from a central location has proven to be an efficient and cost-saving alternative. The diverse list of current companies utilizing space at the port is testimony to the flexibility of the manufacturing space, shipping, and storage facilities available on site. The only public inland port that resides at the confluence of 3 great American waterways. America's Central Port is home to the Granite City and Madison harbors. The Granite City Harbor is a year-round 24-hour slackwater operation, handling 2,500 barges and 3 million tons of grain, steel, petroproducts, and other bulk freight every year. Dry and liquid bulk terminals, as well as general cargo and roll-on, roll-off capabilities are all available. The newly opened Madison Harbor, just south of lock number 27 on the Mississippi, provides open barge navigation straight through to the Gulf of Mexico. The Madison Harbor, a $50 million investment, also features a newly constructed rail loop for unit train transfers, offering convenient access to and from the port. St. Louis is the 3rd busiest rail center in the nation. This central location offers freight movement throughout the country and makes America's Central Port one of the largest rail hubs in America. On site, the Port Harbor Railroad offers short-line 24-hour switching services with on-demand rail service for all port tenants. Over 250 trucking companies have found the central location ideal for reaching over 70% of their nationwide clients within 2 days by truck. At America's Central Port, access to warehouse, harbor, rail freight handling facilities, and immediate highway access makes for a convenience in shipping matched only by a few other ports around the country. Also included on the mixed-use campus, a YMCA fitness center and recreational trail access, office space, 150 apartment units, industrial sites available for lease, and nearly 2 million square feet of warehouse space, all located within Foreign Trade Zone number 31 and monitored by our professional security staff 24/7. America's Central Port, the best combination of river, rail, and road. Your freight on your schedule. We are ready to serve your needs, as we reliably have since 1959 for thousands of companies who are looking for the best way to get their products to any location in the international marketplace. Let us know how we can serve you. America's Central Port, building a world of transportunity.
This particular facility is a railroad waiting to be built. For those of you who think 4x8 loops, this is basically a 4x8 loop. It's a big looped area. There's all kinds of industry you can put in the center and along the edges. Plus, they have some of the coolest motive power you'll ever see if you're into modern stuff. One of the guys who runs this particular railroad is a modeler and a rail fan. So they have some fun with their paint schemes. And they take a little bit of credit and take a little bit of inspiration from the Illinois Terminal, which is the front locomotives. So they've got all kinds of interesting stuff going on. Inside of this particular facility, which strangely enough is an old military base, hence the reason you have apartments and a gym and a lot of big warehouse space that looks strangely enough like military warehouses. It would fit, I'm thinking of you, Perry, it would fit really, really well. Again, like I say, it's a big loop. There's a model railroader article or an RMC article, which is that I'm working up on this particular facility. That's just, it intrigues me. I think it could be a very, very fun small operation in and around the Walls Railroad. And yes, they have passenger service when they do tours. They have some cars that they use to take people around in. I'm hoping we're going to get a tour in 2022 when we're back in St. Louis, assuming they let us out by that time. And like I say, they have all kinds of interesting power. I throw this in because, number one, I saw the Veterans Day engine, and yes, I recognize the veterans in this particular thing, but different kinds of motive power. They nod to the UP with an MP15 that they got from the old Mopac. The 8166 is a Canadian SW 1200 RS. Just all kinds of interesting stuff that they have that's pretty unique. So how do we model this? How would you possibly get barges on your railroad? Well, guess what? They make them. If you get a Walthers catalog, you'll find lots of this interesting stuff. Keebri was the first place I went to get a barge. And this is this very standard barge. It isn't very big, but it's nicely selectively compressed for a model railroad. You don't want to have 20 barges. You'd end up having a model barge facility. You want something a little bit smaller. This works really, really well. It has covers. These things can be used for coal. They can be used for grain. They could be used for scrap. They could be used for sand, whatever you want to haul. If your railroad produces coconuts, they could probably haul coconuts. Getting a little bit more elaborate, there's a great company out east in Baltimore called Custom Model Railroads. They produce a little bit bigger barges. They're a little bit more prototypically correct. They have some really, really nice covers that you can put on them. That they look like the barges you're seeing in all these videos. And again, they have a different set of kinds of things. They also make a really, really nice towboat, which I'll show you in just a second. Work barges. Keebri does work barges. I ran into one of these in the in the silent auction in Kansas City, and it went home with me. And I've since built a couple more because they're something that you can use. They have to dredge all these harbors to keep them at an appropriate depth so they can run the barges into them. And they do that a lot of times with a drag line, and they just put another barge into it and they dump it. One of the largest sources of sand that we use on the roads, along with the salt to keep us from driving into telephone poles, ditches, and other things we don't want to hit, is the Mississippi River, because they dredge the sand out of it every single year. This is a little bit more European. This is a little more tugboat feel, but I have seen these things up on the river. They do have that interesting metal structure. They're good for pushing one barge. Might be a good scratch building target for doing something a little bit different. And this is a little bit smaller boat. This would be a single harbor boat. There's one of these floating around at the lock and dam here because the current's a little bit strong, so they take that out and they use it to push the barges into the locks. And this is that boat. I've built a couple of these because like I say, I'm a boat nerd. They're very, very nice. They look very much like they'd make a decent large tow. You could use them as a push boat in a harbor real comfortably, and they'd be very, very nice. Again, Custom Model Railroads builds these. Loading structures. Well, I wrestled with this one for a while because I didn't quite know how I was going to do it. And then somebody showed me a cinder lift, or a cinder where you'd use with steam locomotives. And I looked at that, and I looked at this picture, and I looked at that, and I looked at the picture, and I said, I think I got it. And so my next scratch building project is another one of these. It's going to become a loading rig or a loading crane for one of these barges, because now I've got a couple of ways to do it. I like to scratch build stuff, but when I want to scratch build something, I want to scratch build something I can't do out of a kit. I'm going to kit bash this one enough to make it work. And again, lots of conveyors. I apologize for the quality of this picture. I took this with probably the worst cell phone known to man at that time. It was a flip phone. That tells you how old this picture is. But again, it was just something. Walthers conveyors. Walthers makes really, really nice metal structures that you can use for the pilings and the barge terminals that you can put these Keebri barges up against. Again, a nice looking grain truck in there. It would be a very appropriate scene. Well, just about the time you think you've seen it all, somebody does something different. Now we're shipping grain in containers, because we can now basically put those containers on boats and get the grain across to the Far East markets. A lot of those containers go back across the country empty. They don't anymore.
Hi, I'm Amanda Price. I work in Town and Country's grain department. Along with buying grain from farmers, I also work to coordinate our container shipments out of our Grafton location. When the containers arrive at our Grafton location on semi-trucks, each container is swept and checked for debris and insects. This is to keep them clean and protect the integrity of the grain before it arrives at its overseas location. Once we've done our check of the containers, the federal graders climb inside and the doors are closed. Then they're able to check for proper sealing and any holes that might be in the container that would allow the grain to leak out during its travels. If the container passes inspection, a temporary wall is constructed out of certified cardboard and lumber that will serve to hold the grain in until the container doors are closed. The containers are then backed up to the conveyor as far as possible, and we begin loading the grain. Once the grain hits the belt, it only takes about 3.5 minutes to fill the container. When we sell grain, it must meet certain qualifications. During each container loading, we take a small sample, and it's later graded by the federal graders to ensure that our grain that we're shipping meets those qualifications. Once the containers leave our facility, they're trucked to rail yards where they're later railed to shipping ports on the East Coast. It's important that proper documentation is kept throughout the whole process so that there are no issues once our grain gets across the ocean. If you have any questions about our container loading process or would like to learn more, please call us at the grain department at 800-472-4644. Hi, I'm Amanda.
So like I say, once you've seen it, you say, okay, I can't see anything even stranger. And then I came across this. We're going to change speeds a little bit. This is not the upper Midwest. This is the Columbia River, Portland, Oregon. And this is what may be the tightest circle of track I've ever seen on a prototype model, or prototype. This is the Louis Dreyfus grain terminal on the Columbia River in Portland. If you went to the National Train Show and you went to the Portland Convention, you were right across the street from this grain elevator every time you took the light rail out to where the train show was, because we were 10 miles away from the convention downtown. Sometimes that's the way it works. The light rail was really cool because you got to do a lot of rail fanning while you're doing it. Well, one day I missed the train, so I walked across the street and I looked at this. This curve is so tight, they can only take 3 covered hoppers around it at once. And the only motive power that works in it without derailing is a trackmobile. So the BNSF brings the cars up in 3-car sets. They split them into these tracks or 4-car sets, depending on what kind of day they're having. And the trackmobile swings around, grabs the 3-car set, moves them around. They dump, which fills the boat slowly, I'm sure, or fills the elevator until they get enough to fill the boat. But I saw this and I said, man, I keep thinking that every time I say you couldn't possibly model something like that, you see it. And in an RPM convention a couple of years ago out west, I saw somebody model a loop just like this one. So anything is possible. Well, if you know history, and if you're a fan of Gordon Lightfoot, you know the story that begins the Gales of November remembered? Well, I put this in because today is the 45th anniversary of the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. About this time, 45 years ago, they were hitting some of the largest waves that had ever been seen on Lake Superior. And about 8:30, 9 o'clock my time, the ship disappeared. As they say, the lights slipped under the waves, and the ship basically foundered and went down. But I put this in because it's not just barges, it's big Laker ships. And again, there's that NMRA convention, that connection, rather, that I see everywhere. Now, we've never been to Superior. I don't think we'll go to Superior. It's a neat place. Duluth Superior is as cool as it gets. Duluth, known for iron ore. As a matter of fact, if you're an iron ore modeler, you probably have something that was inspired by Duluth and shipping from small ore cars onto boats. Superior is known in that particular territory, even though it's right next door, for grain. Superior got the elevators, Duluth got the iron. This is the older Great Northern Elevator. This has since burned down. They built a new one. Looks something like this. And again, you'll notice that that boat is getting loaded right now. It's getting grain out of that elevator. On the other side of the elevator, and on the side that you can kind of see in the grass here, there are covered hoppers there. They are loading all the time. The BNSF loads a lot of grain into Superior. So let's take a look at how you might load an ore boat or a grain boat, a Laker.
At the Thunder Bay loading dock, Equinox's hatch covers come off.
It's good there.
And the ship starts taking on grain at a staggering 1,500 tons an hour. Total load, a walloping 30,000 tons.
3, 4, and 1, yeah. Okay.
Now, the pressure is on Kirk Lake, the 36-year-old first mate.
Fire loading, so hopefully everything goes good. Bring the deck crane back up and we'll look at number 5.
They're counting on him to get the ship loaded as full and as fast as possible so they don't miss out on that extra round trip.
I'm in charge of the loading. The whole load process falls on my shoulders. So
Kirk's worked out a load plan to make sure the wheat is spread evenly throughout the ship's 5 giant holds, poured in a particular order through her 17 hatches. An uneven load can cause a ship to list. In extreme cases, even capsize.
if you do things wrong and don't pay attention, things can happen. Yeah.
But he also has to monitor the ship's draft. That is, how low Equinox sits in the water as she takes on the extra 30,000 tons. The bottom of the ship can't sit deeper than 26¾ feet. That's the maximum depth allowed in the canals and rivers of the St. Lawrence Seaway.
We got a ways to go yet. If we're deep, the company probably get fined and the Seaway will be on top of us.
The skill is to fit in as much cargo as possible without going over that limit.
We come out straight in the end.
But any tonnage Kirk doesn't manage to get on board could add up to thousands of dollars in lost revenue for the company.
That's our goal. Maximize our draft, maximize our cargo, and get it there safely.
So one of the things that I showed that for is they talked a little bit about making sure that the draft of the ship was appropriate. One of the pieces of the Edmonton water got into the holds. It's taconite, you can't see it. Eventually the draft of the ship was so much that it just went straight down and then split. Show you a little bit more. This is another Thunder Bay video. This is a transfer not only across the Great Lakes through Superior, Huron, Erie, and Ontario, but up the St. Louis Seaway to Montreal. When you were watching that, did anybody catch the wheeled payloaders or Caterpillar rubber tired loaders on the cranes? Well, these things are big and they're a little bit difficult to unload. So a lot of times, in order that they can get all the grain out of them and all the grain into those nice conveyors, when they have to dip down into the bays, they actually lower some sort of construction loading device, loading tractor, if you will, into the bays. Now, when they load them into barges, they're little bobcats. There's a little smaller skip loaders, if you will. But in these bigger ships, they actually lower a full Caterpillar tractor down in there to push the grain around. Well, things have gotten a little bit easier. Now, these boats no longer have to have all of the equipment in to conveyor it out. They have self-unloading dumps. And this is in a place that you wouldn't really think is a big grain terminal, Buffalo, New York. Although Buffalo has become the flour miller to the world, because all of the wheat that's in a lot of the corn and various other products produced in the Midwest gets on those Lakers off of rail cars, goes across the lakes and ends up in Buffalo, New York, or Montreal, Canada, where the Canada steamship lines ended up, and gets milled for East Coast use. You may have had a baked product with flour that was produced from Buffalo, because General Mills has a lot of facilities and it's centrally located to them to ship down the East Coast. It's easier for them to do. And these self-loaders actually have conveyors in the bottoms where they basically dump into a conveyor and they come up and they go just like they were loaded out of the elevators. They actually go up an elevator line. So, and you'll see that there are several vacuum trucks producing air. Those vacuum trucks aren't taking wheat, they're taking care of the dust. Because anyone who knows grain elevators knows grain dust is extremely flammable and very explosive. So I kind of threw that in there as my Edmund Fitzgerald thing. Again, it's moving on water. It's moving on steel rails. It's doing a lot of different kinds of things. I thank you for your attention. You'll notice that my email address is in there, David L, put the L in, Berman @gmail.com. Facebook, you can find me as Dave Berman. Our operating group is riverrail2rs.com. If you want to see some pretty amazing modeling, we have some pretty amazing modelers. We've been in RMC a bunch of times. We've been in Great Model Railroad several times. Again, all kinds of different things going on here. We operate, when we're not locked down, we operate every single weekend. So that's pretty much what I got. Let me escape out of here and we'll take some questions if you've got them.
Yep, you've got two actually lined up already, Dave.
Okay. Here's my stop sharing. There we go. I didn't put anybody to sleep, I hope. So the questions.
No, sir, not at all.
Okay. What questions are in the chat, I bet?
Yep. They're there.
I see continue supplying marine after the loss of railroad business. I'm not exactly sure about that one. Oh, we got all kinds of things here.
The
Tell you what,
first,
Perry, you ask me questions and I'll answer.
yeah, the first one that popped up here that was more directly related to your presentation. Could you please briefly discuss the use of Fairbanks Morse engines in both locomotives and tug power applications? Was the marine use or acceptance based on torque? Did Fairbanks Morse continue supplying marine after the loss of the railroad business?
Okay, I wondered what that was about. Okay, let's talk about Fairbanks Morse. As someone mentioned Fairbanks Morse. It's a Wisconsin company. They were made in Beloit. And Fairbanks Morse made a variety of products. And as far as I know, and I'm probably not enough of a guy that knows enough about this to give you a great answer. Fairbanks Morse made big marine engines first, and then decided the railroad business was going to be attractive and went down and got made some smaller 12, 16, and even 8-cylinder product rather than the bigger 20, 24, 36 product that they were used in marine applications. A lot of barge tows have Fairbanks Morse engines in them, or did at one time. Again, along with a lot of the lake ships. Fairbanks Morse said, okay, let's go after the railroad business. And they did, and strangely enough, the Milwaukee Road, it's the home railroad, had a lot of Fairbanks Morse power. They were probably the largest owner of various Fairbanks Morse products. The H1244s, the H1644s, again, 4,400 horsepower, 16, those kinds of things. But Fairbanks Morse found themselves in a situation where the technology was changing not only in the railroad world, but in the marine world, because they were going to more turbines, larger diesels, more effective diesels. And in barge world, the turbines and some of the other different kinds of engines that Fairbanks Morse wasn't making at the time. So I suspect the railroad business was good for them, but it wasn't as good as the marine business. And yes, they still do make diesel engines. I also know that Fairbanks Morse made an awful lot of submarine engines. The submarines in World War II. I don't know much about them. I'd have to do some research, but now you got me interested, so now I'm going to have to do some research.
Okay. The second question was, is the Canadian Steamship Lines part of Canadian Pacific or maybe Canadian National Railroad?
Well, not specifically. You may have noticed in the first Canadian thing where they were loading in Thunder Bay, the guy was wearing a jacket that had an Algoma Central Lines patch on it. The Algoma Central was a steamship company first, and then they developed railroad tracks and railroad commodities to do loading to them. And eventually they were purchased by the Wisconsin Central, merged into the Wisconsin Central, which ended up merged into the CN. So now the Algoma Central Lines probably is a small piece of CN. I don't know how much of it they currently own. I don't think the Steamship Lines is a Canadian Pacific company. Could be. I haven't done that research either, so I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
Okay.
Are there any more questions? Sorry. No questions.
I guess not. I'm going to first thank you, Dave. I really appreciate this. This was interesting, and I like that loop, the loop railroad. I like that Central Port Railroad. That does look interesting. I agree with Walt. Thank you for your presentation. This was really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's good.
Thank you.
It's fun to speak. It's fun to speak to an NMRA division. I live between two divisions, and they're both 120 miles apart from me, so I don't get to do a whole lot with them.
Well, thank you very much, Dave.
Rob.
And next month we'll have our Christmas party, and of course we hope people will show up and participate and bring your dinner. And Dave, I know I'll be talking with you in the not too distant future, doing a clinic for you guys. Yeah,
and like I say, I do grain elevators too. I can bore you to death with grain elevators, or ethanol, or anything that you want to talk about.
Ooh, ethanol might be fun.
Hey, Barry, I'm going to have some closing remarks. Officially, this was our last general meeting for the 2020 year. As Barry said a minute ago, we will be having our holiday get-together on December 8th virtually. But this was actually my last business meeting. And I wanted to say thank you to everybody for your support for the last 4 years as superintendent. And appreciate everything. I've been on the board a long time. I'll still be on the board after this, but I wanted to say thank you for everything. And this year's been a challenging year, but we've done very strongly. We're resilient, and we keep coming back, and we're hanging in there. So, Dave, fantastic presentation, and really enjoyed it. And again, thank you to all the vets out there. I know tomorrow is your honorable day, but we remember you all the time, and thank you for your services to the United States of America. Sally, any last comments?
Just it was a great, interesting for sure. I know some of the areas that he was talking about, so that makes it extra special for me. So I really appreciate it, Dave. You did a great job.
Maybe we should hang out. We can talk Wisconsin.
Oh, I know where Winona is.
Well, like I say, I live between Winona and La Crosse on the Wisconsin side. There's a reason I live on the Wisconsin side.
Uh-huh.
Better cheese.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So anyway, very good job, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, everybody. We look forward to seeing you at the December gathering, and if we don't see you before then, tune in for the Piedmont Pilgrimage. And otherwise, everybody have a wonderful and happy Thanksgiving, and safe travels if you're traveling, and if not, just enjoy your being with your family and being at home. And we will see you back hopefully in December. And everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you for attending.
Have a good night now.
Good night.
Bye.
Dave, I really enjoyed that, sir.
Oh, good. This is what I do for fun. I call myself an industrial archaeologist because I go into places and try and figure out how things work.
Yeah, I really was impressed with that railroad. The Americas, the one with the two SD40-2s painted differently. I was pretty impressive, and I really like what I was seeing. That was really cool. So you're right. That would be a really neat way to model something.
That's on my list. I get to retire soon, for obvious reasons, not health or anything, but it's a good time to get out of education. But I told myself one of the first things I'm going to start doing is writing articles and see if I can write some of this interesting stuff, like a couple of shelf layouts out of Childs Road and several other places I photographed and dug around in.
Well, I was impressed. A lot of cool photographs, a lot of different variety of stuff. And you're right. It all ties together because it's just part of the transportation network. So really was cool. So thank you very much.
There's a whole bunch of the Ohio River I need to explore that I haven't been because it hasn't been a territory I've gotten that far up in. But they say, give me time to get an NMRA convention there and I'll see more of it.
I used to, my uncle used to be a lockmaster on the Savannah River outside of Augusta, Georgia.
Okay.
Back in the early 70s, the Mary Brick Company used to transport the brick down to Savannah via the barges. And I used to watch that go through because of all the red clay in the Augusta area. They made lots of brick. So brick was transported all over the world. So it was quite fascinating to watch how much brick was shipped. So, but, Perry, thank you for your hard work tonight. Appreciate it. And,
not a problem.
Raymond Stewart, I see you online, sir. Thank you.